Have you ever felt like your own mind is just this completely chaotic boardroom of totally different drives?
Oh, yeah. Constantly.
Right, like on one side of the table, you have this raw, unfiltered ambition, and it's just fighting with a desperate desire for total freedom.
Hmm.
And then on the other side, your cold, calculating logic is just clashing with deep, overwhelming emotion. And you're just sitting there watching these forces argue. I'm wondering, who is actually in charge of this meeting?
It's really the ultimate human dilemma, isn't it? I mean, we all experience that intense internal fragmentation.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
it's that constant push and pull of competing energies that just seem to have a mind of their own. They're dragging us in like 5 different directions before
Right.
we've even had our morning coffee.
And normally the advice we get is to just, well, to suppress those forces, right?
Yeah.
We label the ambition as greedy, or we say the emotion is dysfunctional.
Right. We pathologize it.
Exactly. But today we are doing a deep dive into a worldview that completely flips that script. The source material for today's deep dive is this fascinating practitioner-written document. It's titled Shaktism.pdf.
Yes.
And I really have to tell you, this is not some dry, dusty historical textbook.
Oh, far from it. It is intensely personal. It's a first-hand guide
Hmm.
written from deep inside the Shaktism tradition.
Yeah, you can really feel that when reading it.
You really can. The author isn't observing this as some academic outsider looking through a microscope. They are explicitly speaking as someone who lives and breathes the rhythm of this ancient cosmic philosophy.
Okay, let's unpack this because I was absolutely blown away by the bridge this author builds here.
It's quite a leap.
It really is. They take this ancient cosmic worship of the goddess and they wire it directly into modern psychological frameworks.
Mm.
They map these massive cosmic ideas onto the very subpersonalities we all struggle with every single day. And I want to promise you, the listener, right out of the gate, you do not need to be a religious scholar for this. It's not at all. Or a historian, or even a particularly spiritual person to get massive value from this. Because at its core, this material is a highly practical, honestly kind of ruthless blueprint for commanding your own internal energy.
It really operates as a survival guide for the mind.
Mm.
And to grasp it, well, we have to start with the core thesis of the text,
Right.
which is this radical, completely uncompromising statement. It says, "You are not separate from the divine. You are a literal fragment of Shakti experiencing itself."
That's a huge claim.
It is. And this deep dive is going to challenge the very concept of your static identity. It's going to require you to look inward and ask some deeply uncomfortable questions about who or what is really driving your daily actions.
So before we get into the actual psychology of how to organize this chaotic boardroom in your head, we need to understand the foundation.
Right, the historical context.
Yeah, we have to look at where this radical philosophy of active living energy actually came from. Because as I was reading through this, I realized it completely inverted the standard spiritual answers of its time.
Totally upside down.
And I was fascinated by the historical roots here. I mean, there isn't a single founding moment, right? Or one solitary prophet who came down from a mountain.
No, it's entirely organic. It emerged and evolved over thousands of years. We are tracking roots that go all the way back to the Indus Valley civilization. Yeah, around 2500 to 1500 BCE. That's where we find these early female figurines that suggest the very beginnings of goddess worship.
Right, and as I read further into the context, it flows right through the Vedic period. You start seeing goddesses like Devi and Aditi appearing in the texts.
Yes, but, and this is important, they aren't the supreme ultimate reality yet. They are just part of a larger pantheon at that point.
Okay, so when does that shift happen?
That shift happens a bit later, the full flowering of Shaktism, where the goddess is recognized not just as a deity, but as the ultimate reality itself. That happens roughly between 300 and 1200 CE.
Okay, so a massive philosophical leap.
Massive. You see the composition of foundational texts like the Devimatnya in the 5th or 6th century, and you get towering intellectual figures like Abhinavagupta.
Right, the text mentioned him.
Yeah, he deeply connected the intense meditative practices of Kashmir Shaivism with this Shakti philosophy. But what's really crucial here is how it was built.
How so?
Well, it was shaped by unnamed yoginis, fierce tantric practitioners, and poet saints. It was transmitted experientially.
Body to body, breath to breath.
Exactly, rather than just through these top-down institutional decrees.
And here is the core philosophical problem they were trying to solve, which I think, honestly, anyone listening can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
The fundamental question is basically if the ultimate reality, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, if it is perfect, peaceful, and whole,
Uh-huh.
why does a messy, changing, chaotic, and often painful world exist at all?
It is the heaviest philosophical question there is, period. How do you reconcile a perfect source with a flawed reality? I mean, many other traditions look at the suffering, the constant change, the sheer messiness of the material world, and they conclude that the physical world must be an illusion.
Like Maya.
Yes, often called Maya. Or they categorize creation as a secondary mistake, a fall from grace.
Something you just have to endure.
Exactly. Something you endure but ultimately need to renounce and escape.
But the shock to answer is just a complete 180-degree turn.
It really is.
Shaktism says the world is real. It is not an illusion. It is not a mistake that needs fixing. It is the literal dance of the goddess. The text hammers this point home over and over. The physical body isn't some meat prison keeping you from spiritual awakening.
No.
The body is the very tool of awakening.
We really need to pause here and examine why that distinction matters so profoundly, because it dictates your entire approach to life.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, if you genuinely believe the world is an illusion or a trap, your entire spiritual trajectory is aimed at detachment.
Makes sense.
Your goal is to escape, to transcend the physical, to minimize your footprint, shut your eyes, and ultimately just leave it all behind.
Okay, let me test an analogy on you to see if I'm tracking this right.
Go for it.
Let's say ultimate reality is a perfectly silent, peaceful room. Other traditions seem to view creation as someone walking into that perfect room and rudely turning on a radio, just blasting static and noise.
Oh, that's good.
And so the spiritual goal is to find the plug, pull it out, and get the silence back. But Shaktism is saying, no, creation isn't a disruption of the peace. Creation is the music itself.
Yes.
The static, the melody, the heavy bass, it's all the expression of the divine. So why would you want to unplug the radio when you could just learn to dance to it?
That is a brilliant way to frame it.
Yeah.
The noise isn't an error, it's the feature. The text contrasts this beautifully with other major Hindu traditions, just to highlight that difference.
How does it break that down?
For instance, it notes that Shaivism often focuses on Shiva as pure consciousness, emphasizing stillness, deep awareness, and of sort of cosmic detachment. And then Vaishnavism, on the other hand, often focuses on Vishnu or Krishna. That emphasizes order, preservation, and a deep relational devotion.
But Shaktism focuses on power in motion.
Exactly.
It makes the argument that the stillness of Shiva and the order of Vishnu are completely inert without the force that actually makes them possible. Shakti is the power that manifests reality.
Which naturally leads us to ask, okay, if the music of the world is real and divine, how is that energy structured?
Right.
How does pure, infinite, unmoving consciousness actually downgrade itself into, like, my messy desk, my stressful inbox, and my physical body?
Yeah, how does the infinite become the finite? The text introduces this dynamic duo of existence, Shiva and Shakti. But it is incredibly careful to point out that they are not two separate gods sitting on two separate thrones in the sky somewhere.
Right.
They are one single reality.
They are entirely inseparable. You cannot have one without the other. The text describes Shiva as pure consciousness. So think of it as still, silent, and completely unmoving potential. And Shakti is the power that makes that consciousness move, act, and become tangible.
I want to try and update my analogy here.
Let's hear it.
If Shiva is the pure blank movie screen in a theater, silent, unmoving, and perfectly capable of holding an image, Shakti is the projector's light and the film spool itself.
I like that.
You can't see the movie without the screen, but the screen is just a dead white void without the light.
That's a much more accurate mechanism than just calling them two halves of a whole.
Yeah.
The screen has the capacity to hold any story,
Right.
but it does absolutely nothing without the dynamic light projecting the images.
Right.
And the light needs the screen to catch it, otherwise it just dissipates into the void.
What I love about this text is that it doesn't leave us stranded with abstract physics. I mean, the human mind simply cannot grasp infinite cosmic energy projecting reality. It's just too big.
Way too abstract.
So Shaktism gives us the forms of the goddess as entry points. We have Durga, who represents strength, protection, and a fiercely ordered warrior force.
Yeah.
We have Kali, representing the destruction of illusion, the ravages of time, and raw, unflinching truth. We have Lashmi, the force of abundance, prosperity, and harmony, and Saraswati, representing knowledge, creativity, and crystal clear logic.
What's fascinating here is how the tradition insists These are not separate entities.
Wait, they're not?
No, they aren't different women living in some celestial realm. They are different voltages or expressions of the exact same underlying force.
Ah, I see.
The author uses a very grounding example here. Fire.
Okay.
Fire can warm a family home, it can burn that same house to the ground, or it can be used in a lantern to illuminate a dark path.
Yeah.
It is all the exact same element, just applied with different intent and intensity.
So in this tradition, what is the ultimate goal?
Yeah.
They call moksha or liberation. If the goal isn't to unplug the projector and stare at a blank screen, what is it?
The goal is to realize you are the light. The text explicitly addresses the concept of life after death and the cycle of rebirth, known as samsara. It states that as long as you identify as a separate, isolated ego, as long as you think you are just the temporary character in the movie playing on the screen, you remain bound in the cycle. You are trapped by the drama.
Because you're taking the movie way too seriously. You actually think the car crash on screen is going to hurt you.
Exactly. But freedom, true liberation, comes the moment you experientially realize, I am not separate from Shakti. When you realize you are the light projecting the image, the drama of the movie loses its binding power over you. You achieve freedom, even while you're still alive, still sitting in the theater, still watching the film.
Okay, I buy the idea that the world is the music of the divine, and I completely understand the screen and the projector analogy.
Great.
But this is where the source material makes a hard, fascinating pivot.
It really does.
It takes this massive cosmic theology and forces it into our daily psychology. How do these faces of the goddess, these cosmic voltages like Kali and Durga, map directly onto our own psychological chaos?
This is the genius of the practitioner's approach. They build a bridge between ancient theology and modern psychology by first completely reframing human nature.
How so?
In this worldview, human nature is not broken. You are not inherently sinful, flawed, or a mistake that needs to be fixed.
Which honestly is a massive relief to read.
It really changes your entire starting point. The text argues that your chaotic human nature is simply divine energy experiencing incomplete awareness.
Okay.
They call this state avidya. You are literally divine energy, but you are operating through a highly limited physical and mental system, and you've simply forgotten your source.
You think you are the small, fragile ego when you are actually a manifestation of cosmic power.
Precisely.
You let your emotions control you instead of realizing you are the one generating them. And this is where the author makes a brilliant stylistic choice that I want to highlight.
The naming convention.
Yes. They don't just leave these as abstract goddesses. They actually map these archetypes onto modern, recognizable subpersonalities, and they give them everyday Western names so we can spot them in ourselves immediately.
It's a very clever pedagogical tool. It brings the cosmos into the boardroom of your mind.
Right. So they introduce Val, who represents discipline, ambition, power, and dominance. That's your internal Durga. Then there's Devin, representing stoicism and rigid control. Addie, representing the wild drive for exploration, rule-breaking, and freedom. Kelly, representing deep emotion, empathy, and compassion. And finally, Kenny, representing cold, structured, analytical logic, your internal Saraswati.
And from a Shakti perspective, if you find yourself torn between Val wanting to work an 80-hour week and Addie wanting to quit and move to a cabin in the woods.
Which happens to all of us.
Constantly. These are not fragments of a broken mind. They're not psychological diseases to be cured. They are literal internal expressions of Shakti. The problem isn't that you have these intense competing drives.
The problem is the chaotic boardroom. No one is sitting at the head of the table. Val is screaming at Addie, Kelly is crying in the corner, and Kenny is drawing a spreadsheet about why everyone is being inefficient.
Exactly.
It's a lack of integration and mastery.
Precisely. And the text doesn't just diagnose the problem. It provides a highly strategic, 5-stage framework for how transformation actually happens. Because it doesn't happen just by believing in it.
Right. You can't just wish for it.
No, you have to train the mind.
Let's slow down and really walk through these 5 stages, because this was the biggest aha moment for me in the entire document.
Let's do it.
Let's use a real-world scenario. Let's say you're at work. You've just been handed an impossibly stressful project with a ridiculous deadline, and your boss was incredibly rude about it. How does this framework apply?
Perfect scenario.
Yeah.
Stage 1 is awareness.
Okay.
In the moment your boss drops that project on you, you simply begin to notice the impulses firing off in your boardroom. You notice Val, your ambition flaring up, wanting to dominate the project and prove the boss wrong.
Right.
But you also notice, Kelly, your emotion, feeling deeply hurt and unappreciated. And Addie is screaming at you to just walk out the door and quit. In stage 1, you don't do anything. You just observe the chaos.
You're just taking attendance at the meeting.
Yes. Then comes stage 2, separation.
Okay.
This is the critical pivot. This is where you internally declare, I am not these impulses. I am the awareness observing them. You detach your core identity from the passing surge of energy.
Oh, wow.
You realize you are not the anger and you are not the urge to quit. You are the screen. They are just the movie.
Okay, so you've stepped back. What's stage 3?
Stage 3 is direction. Now that you are sitting at the head of the table as the observer, you start making choices. Which energy do I amplify right now? Which do I restrain?
So you take control?
Exactly. In our scenario, you might consciously tell Kelly, the emotion, I see you're hurt, but we need to put that in a box until 6 p.m. You tell Addie, the escape artist, we aren't quitting today. And you intentionally hand the microphone to Val and Kenny, ambition and logic, to map out the project.
You are actively playing the commander. You aren't suppressing the emotion. You're scheduling it. You're directing traffic.
Exactly. Stage 4 is integration. Over time, as you practice this, the internal forces stop fighting each other for control.
Okay.
Kelly stops trying to sabotage Val. The boardroom realizes there is a competent CEO in charge, and they start working as a unified team under your direction.
And finally, stage 5 is embodiment.
Yes, embodiment is when you aren't just practicing a technique anymore. You aren't consciously directing traffic because it has become your default state.
It's just who you are.
Right. You become aligned energy in motion. You respond to the stressful project with total clarity and command without even having to think about it.
The psychological worldview here is just intense. The author explicitly rejects the modern wellness idea of finding balance.
Oh, absolutely.
Because passive balance usually just means neutralizing your energy so nothing rocks the boat. Shaktism demands command.
It values power. It wants you to have massive ambition. It wants you to have deep, earth-shattering emotion. But it demands that you rule those forces rather than letting them rule you.
But let me push back on this, because I can hear people listening and thinking, wait a minute, cultivating multiple distinct personalities competing for the steering wheel, naming them Val and Kelly, isn't that just a recipe for a psychological breakdown?
I get that.
It sounds dangerously close to encouraging a fractured psyche.
It's a fair critique if you look at it through a purely clinical, pathological lens.
Yeah.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture the author is painting, they view the human being as a high-energy system.
Right.
A sports car, not a golf cart. Having strong, distinct internal drives is an incredibly powerful thing. The danger isn't the power. The danger is the lack of structure. Having a massive V8 engine in your car is only a problem if you don't have a steering wheel or brakes.
So the subpersonalities aren't fractures. They're just highly specialized tools in the toolbox.
Yeah. Exactly. The author gives a very stark warning. If you don't direct your ambition, it will burn you out and destroy your relationships. If you don't direct your empathy, it will bleed you dry and destabilize you.
Yeah.
If you don't direct your intellect, it will overanalyze you into total paralysis.
Oh, man. The intellect overanalyzing into total paralysis? I think everyone listening has been taken hostage by Kenny the logic brain at 2 a.m. just staring at the ceiling, calculating worst-case scenarios.
Oh, we all have.
So the text throws down a direct challenge to the reader, and I want to pass that directly to you listening right now. Look at your own life this past week. Which of your internal drives has had the most control over your actions?
It's a tough question.
Is it your ambition pushing you to exhaustion? Is it your desire for comfort making you procrastinate? And more importantly, is the drive currently holding the steering wheel the one that should be leading right now?
It is a phenomenal, confronting question.
Yeah.
Because identifying who is actually driving the car is the mandatory first step toward taking the keys back.
Okay, so if the goal is to become this unified commander, we run into a practical wall. You can't just think your way to mastery.
Nope.
Reading a PDF or listening to this deep dive isn't going to magically organize your internal boardroom. How does this tradition actually build that internal command? What are the mechanics?
This is where we move from abstract philosophy into hard technology. And I use the word technology intentionally.
Okay.
Shaktism is heavily practice-based. The text insists that direct experience trumps intellectual theory every single time.
Yeah.
You cannot just philosophize about Shakti, you have to run the energy through your nervous system.
And the text outlines some very specific core practices. But it doesn't just list them. It implies a mechanism for how they work.
Yeah.
Let's break these down. First is mantra.
Yes, mantra.
Using sound as power, repeating sacred syllables. How does this actually help command the boardroom?
Mantra operates almost like neurolinguistic conditioning. When your mind is spiraling, when Kenny is overanalyzing or Kelly is panicking, your linguistic brain is generating a million chaotic sentences a minute.
It's exhausting.
Right. Mantra forces the mind to lock onto a single resonant sound. It bypasses the analytical brain. You are essentially using a specific phonetic frequency to jam the radar of your own anxiety, forcing the mind into a single point of focus.
That makes so much sense. It's an anchor.
Exactly.
Then there's yantra, which uses sacred geometry and visual representations of cosmic energy.
Yantra works on your visual processing in a similar way. Human beings are pattern recognition machines. We are constantly scanning our environment, categorizing threats and opportunities.
Right, looking out for danger.
Staring at the complex, mathematically precise geometry of a yantra exhausts the brain's pattern recognition software. It gives the visual cortex a hyper-specific focal point, which physically quiets the mental chatter. It's a tool for inducing a deeply altered state of concentration.
Then we have puja, the daily ritual of offering and devotion, and meditation for direct awareness. But here's where it gets really interesting for me and where I have to raise a massive red flag.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
The text brings up Tantra. It describes it as advanced systems using breath, the body, and energy channels. But let's be real, in modern pop culture, Tantra has been completely degraded.
Oh, totally.
It's either sold as exotic sexuality in an expensive weekend workshop, or it's used as a spiritual excuse for wild, rule-breaking rebellion.
It is arguably the most misunderstood, bastardized concept in modern spirituality. The text takes a very firm, almost severe stance to correct the record here.
What does it say?
Authentic Tantra has absolutely nothing to do with self-indulgence. It is a highly disciplined, deeply structured system for accelerating human transformation by working directly with intense volatile energy.
But wait, the text literally says that in Tantra, nothing is outside the divine, so nothing is inherently forbidden.
It does say that.
It talks about breaking social taboos. It talks about worshiping Kali in cremation grounds at midnight. If you're telling people that nothing is forbidden and they should embrace their darkest, most destructive drives, isn't that just giving people a spiritual permission slip to be toxic, act out their worst impulses, and call it enlightenment?
I completely understand that reaction, and it is exactly the trap the author warns against. The philosophy says that yes, ultimately everything is Shakti. Death, rage, and sexuality are just as divine as peace, purity, and prayer.
Okay.
However, and this is a massive, however, the text is explicit, that engaging with those intense energies without immense ironclad internal discipline is not spirituality. It is self-destruction, disguised as spirituality. It's spiritual narcissism.
It's like deciding you want to study high-voltage electricity, so you just go grab a live power line with your bare hands instead of wearing rubber gloves and learning the physics first.
Exactly.
You aren't going to become an electrician. You're just going to fry your system.
Exactly. The taboo-breaking, like meditating in a cremation ground, isn't done to be edgy or to rebel against your parents. It is a highly calculated exposure therapy.
Wow, exposure therapy.
Yes. It forces the practitioner to confront their deepest, most primal fear, the fear of death and the destruction of the ego. You sit with the horror until you realize that even the horror is just the play of the goddess. But if you tried that without the foundation of discipline, you will just traumatize yourself.
That distinction is crucial. It's about mastery, not indulgence. And I love how this integration of the sacred extends into the most basic, mundane parts of daily life. The text talks about food, actually.
It does.
In this tradition, eating isn't just caloric consumption. Food is viewed as prasada, blessed energy. You offer it first, acknowledging its divine source, and then you consume it as power.
It turns every single meal into a practice of mindfulness and integration.
Even the art and architecture serve a functional purpose. When you see a statue of a goddess like Durga, she has multiple arms and she's holding all these different weapons, riding a lion.
Very striking imagery.
To an outsider, it just looks like wild, decorative, mythological art. But the text explains it's a symbolic blueprint. It represents mastering multiple powers simultaneously. The fact that she has a perfectly calm, serene face in the middle of a bloody, chaotic battlefield, that is the ultimate visual representation of internal command.
It is a visual language designed to teach you how to behave in the boardroom of your mind.
Yeah.
Total chaos around you, absolute stillness within you.
So we have this immense, highly disciplined power being generated by individual practitioners. But energy doesn't just stay isolated on a meditation cushion.
No, it inevitably spills over.
Right. When a philosophy fundamentally embraces power and action as sacred, it's going to shape the external world of politics, society, and culture.
It absolutely did. If you have a tradition that literally worships power and victory, kings and emperors are going to pay very close attention.
100%.
The text notes that historically, rulers constantly sought royal patronage with forms of the goddess, specifically Durga and Kali. Because if you are ruling a kingdom, you don't just need peace and love. You need martial power, protection, and a sense of divine, unquestionable legitimacy.
Right. Building a massive temple to the warrior goddess is a pretty clear political statement to your enemies.
Absolutely.
And the text mentions that behind the scenes, kings would actually consult tantric practitioners. They would use ritual specialists for strategic advantages in war or to cast protective barriers around the court. Power respects power.
But what I find most compelling about the history of Shaktism is how it actually survived the rise and fall of all those empires. It didn't survive because it had a massive army.
How did it survive then?
It survived through total, brilliant decentralization.
This was my favorite historical insight in the document. Shaktism wasn't a rigid, top-down institution. It didn't have a single pope. It didn't have a central Vatican or a main headquarters that an invading army could just conquer and destroy to wipe out the religion. It embedded itself into the very micro-fabric of daily life.
Right.
It was in the kitchens, it was on the family altars, it was in massive, chaotic regional festivals in places like West Bengal and Assam.
Its adaptability is its greatest survival mechanism. It rarely fought local indigenous traditions. It simply absorbed them.
Oh, wow.
And it offered layered access depending on what you could handle. If you were a regular villager, it offered bhakti's simple, beautiful devotion, singing, and community festivals.
Accessible to everyone.
Right. But if you were a serious, intense ascetic, it retained the advanced, highly technical, dangerous systems of Tantra. It provided incredible depth without excluding the masses.
It really reminds me of an open source operating system in the tech world, like Linux.
Oh, how so?
Well, you can take this OS Shaktism and install it on any hardware. You can install it in a royal court to legitimize a king's war, or you can install it in a village kitchen as a grandmother's daily prayer over the rice.
That's a great point.
It adapts perfectly to whatever system is running it, whereas a rigidly centralized top-down religion is like a closed server. If the main server goes down, if the temple is burned or the leader is killed, the whole system crashes.
That is a superb analogy. The decentralized code of Shaktism is almost impossible to eradicate. And the text provides a stark strategic analysis of why this matters for us today.
What does it say?
It states point blank, power is not the enemy. Uncontrolled power is. That is true for an ancient government, it is true for modern society, and it is absolutely true for your individual psyche.
Wow.
Shaktism survived century after century, precisely because it understands the mechanics of integrating raw power into daily, sustainable habits.
But the author is very honest that it wasn't always smooth sailing. They don't paint a utopian picture. Shaktism faced serious tensions.
Yes, it did.
Orthodox religious groups often hated it because of its taboo-breaking practices and its total rejection of rigid caste-based purity laws. And there's a real, deeply acknowledged tension between the spiritual philosophy and societal reality.
Yes, the author admits a painful contradiction here. Shaktism, spiritually, elevates the feminine as the ultimate supreme reality.
Right.
Yet the societies that have practiced this for centuries still struggle deeply with ongoing systemic gender inequality.
Worshipping a goddess in the temple doesn't automatically mean you treat the women in your community with equality. The spiritual ideal doesn't instantly fix the deeply ingrained flaws of human culture.
It is a vital reality check. The philosophy provides a flawless cosmic framework, but flawed human beings still have to execute it, and humans fail.
Which leads us directly into how this ancient, open-source, adaptable tradition is functioning right now, today.
Yeah, the modern era.
We see how it survived centuries of emperors and Orthodox critics, but how is it surviving the modern era? How does a fierce, demanding tradition handle the age of TikTok spirituality, 15-second wellness trends, and our completely shattered attention spans?
This is where the author's critique gets incredibly sharp, almost surgical. Because modern people are dealing with massive, unprecedented crises.
Like what?
We have completely fragmented identities, we have skyrocketing mental health issues, and we have a profound, literal disconnection from our own physical bodies. We live entirely in our heads, staring at glowing rectangles all day.
And Shaktism is uniquely perfectly positioned to address this. It tells you that your fragmented identity isn't a disease, it's just uncoordinated energy.
Exactly.
It reframes your intense anxiety or anger, not as something to be immediately medicated away or suppressed into a dark corner, but as raw fuel to be directed.
However, the text highlights a severe split in how this tradition is currently being consumed in the West.
A split.
Yes. On one side, you have what the author calls authentic adaptation. This is where serious practitioners are doing the heavy lifting. They are integrating the deep, demanding practices of Shaktism with modern neuroscience, trauma therapy, and psychology. They are doing the work.
But on the other side, you have surface-level consumption. Outsiders see the cool imagery, the swords, the tigers, the exotic chants, and they think Shaktism is just this soft, aesthetic goddess worship. They reduce this fierce cosmic technology to shallow empowerment slogans you can print on a canvas tote bag.
The author leans in very hard on critiquing this modern divine feminine trend. They point out that stripping away the discipline, the danger, and the darker, more demanding aspects of the goddess just to keep the comforting, Instagram-friendly aesthetics completely neuters the tradition.
It removes the power.
The feminine, in Shaktism, as we discussed with Kali, is not just a nurturing mother. It is deeply destructive, ruthless, and uncompromising toward the ego.
Right.
If you only want the gentle mother who tells you you're perfect just the way you are, and you refuse to face the terrifying destroyer who demands you change, you lose the actual power of the system entirely.
Let me put it this way. It's exactly like someone who wants the identity of an elite mountain climber. So they go out and buy the expensive jacket, they buy the carabiners, they take a perfectly lit photo looking tensively at a mountain range for their social media.
Right, playing the part.
But they absolutely refuse to wake up at 4 a.m., they refuse to do the grueling cardio, and they never actually leave the coffee shop. You want the identity and the aesthetic of the practitioner, but you completely refuse the friction and the discipline required to actually alter your reality.
That is exactly what the author is calling out. People want the feeling of power without the heavy burden of responsibility and command. They want the magic without the mechanics.
So the text poses a critical final question for the modern era, and I want to pose it directly to you, our listener. Take a hard look at your own life and your own habits of consumption.
It's an important reflection.
Are you currently just consuming ideas? Are you just listening to smart conversations, reading books, collecting interesting concepts to sound smart at dinner parties? Or are you actually taking these tools and training your mind and behavior in the dark when no one is watching? Because, as the author bluntly states, only one of those paths leads upward.
It is the difference between reading a map in your living room and actually putting your boots on the dirt and walking the mountain.
So what does this all mean? Let's zoom out and look at the entire journey we just took through this remarkable document.
Let's recap.
Shaktism is not about bowing down to a distant, angry deity in the sky, hoping they grant you a favor. It is a deeply practical, highly demanding, psychological and spiritual framework.
Absolutely.
It forces you to recognize that the chaotic, intense energies inside you, your burning ambition, your paralyzing fear, your cold logic, all your subpersonalities are literal, living manifestations of cosmic power.
They are Shakti.
The goal of this path is not to find peace through avoidance, detachment, or suppression. The goal is to find peace as a natural byproduct of achieving total mastery, command, and alignment of those internal forces.
And if we take this framework seriously, it fundamentally alters how we view not just ourselves, but everyone around us. Which brings me to a final thought.
Yeah.
I want to leave you with something that expands on the author's work, but requires us to look outward. We've spent this whole time talking about mastering your own internal energy, your own boardroom. But Shaktism teaches that the entire universe, every single atom, is made of this exact same Shakti.
Right.
Which means the chaotic energy you are fighting against out in the world, in your difficult boss, your estranged family member, or even the people you fundamentally disagree with, is the exact same divine energy running through your own veins.
Oh, wow.
If you truly cannot separate yourself from the divine, you also cannot separate yourself from your worst enemy. They are just a different voltage of the same current.
Wow. That completely changes the stakes.
It does. So as you go about the rest of your day, consider this. How does realizing that your adversary is made of the exact same divine fire as you change the way you walk into your next conflict?